In March 1944, hundreds died inside one Italian tunnel. No bomb hit them. No enemy fired a shot. Its number was 8017. It was a freight train, yet civilians climbed onto it through a country starving under war. Southern Italy had been torn apart by war, occupation, broken transport, and hunger. Food was worth a dangerous journey. At stations along the route, people reportedly climbed aboard cars, roofs, buffers, and any ledge that would hold them. The official toll would become 517 dead. But the train carried unauthorized passengers, and the count has never ended the argument. The line crossed the Apennines near Balvano. Its grades were steep, its wartime locomotives strained, and its tunnels held their breath. Many riders were traveling without permission, seeking food or work. Their destination mattered less than getting aboard before the train left. Italy's railways were running under wartime damage and coal shortages. The engines available to 8217 were part of that larger breakdown. The train hauled freight wagons, and people found space wherever they could, inside cars, on platforms, and outside the cars. The reason Train 8017 stopped inside Army Tunnel is disputed in the surviving accounts. That uncertainty still matters. Army Tunnel was a confined railway passage. Once the train stopped inside, exhaust had nowhere easy to go. The mountain grade demanded power. Steam locomotives answered by burning fuel, consuming air, and releasing exhaust into the same enclosed space. Army Tunnel became more than a passage. For the people on 8017, it became the place where motion ended. Later accounts list excessive weight among possible causes, but a contemporaneous account says why 8017 stopped remained disputed. A stopped steam train was not silent. The locomotives kept working, and every effort to move created more exhaust. Carbon monoxide comes from incomplete combustion. It cannot be seen, and in a tunnel it can displace every ordinary sense of safety. The tunnel cut the passengers off from the mountain outside. Their train was no longer a route. It was a sealed corridor. The fatal gas was linked to locomotive exhaust in a poorly ventilated tunnel, not to a blast and not to enemy action. Carbon monoxide prevents blood from carrying oxygen properly. A person can weaken, lose consciousness, and never understand why. Passengers were scattered across freight cars and exposed positions. In the tunnel, every enclosed pocket of air became part of the risk. No source records a single universal moment when everyone understood the danger. The tunnel preserved exhaust, not testimony. Smoke could be seen. Carbon monoxide could not. In a dark tunnel, that difference made every visible warning incomplete. There were no modern gas monitors, emergency ventilation systems, or passenger safeguards on this wartime freight movement. The people aboard were not a single group with one purpose. They were civilians caught inside the same stalled machine. Unauthorized passengers leave weak paperwork. That is why the dead of Balvano became a number before they became identified people. Army Tunnel did not create the exhaust. It trapped it around a train unable to clear the passage. Poor ventilation meant exhaust could linger. The longer engines worked in place, the less the tunnel behaved like open railway. Records agree on the lethal environment. They do not resolve every operational decision made while 8217 was trapped inside. A freight train stalled in a poorly ventilated tunnel. Locomotives produced carbon monoxide. Hundreds of civilians were exposed. No reliable minute-by-minute record captures the air inside the tunnel. What is certain is that the train remained there long enough for disaster. A tunnel gives a train one direction forward and one back. A stalled freight convoy can turn both directions into distance. The disaster became known after others reached the train. The sources describe a scene of mass death inside and around its cars. The available record does not settle every action taken in the tunnel after discovery. It does document the catastrophic outcome. The deaths are attributed to carbon monoxide asphyxiation from locomotive exhaust in the poorly ventilated tunnel. The official number, 5 on 117, became the disaster's most repeated fact. It was never a complete portrait of everyone who boarded. This was not a bombing, a derailment, or a collision. It was poisoned air accumulating around a stranded wartime train. Italy in 1944 was divided by war. Civilian movement, rail control, and public information were all shaped by emergency. Balvano became one of the deadliest rail disasters in Italian history, yet it remained far less known than many wartime attacks. The number 517 appears in official accounts. Historians and later writers have questioned whether it captured everyone aboard. For many writers, this was not a symbolic journey. It was an improvised response to wartime scarcity, made one train at a time. The record leaves the stopping point unresolved. It does not leave the tunnel's danger unresolved once exhaust accumulated. The train did not need to crash to become deadly. It only needed to remain where the mountain kept its air. Hunger put civilians on freight cars. War weakened the railway. The tunnel turned locomotive exhaust into a killing atmosphere. The train's stop remains disputed. The carbon monoxide hazard from its locomotives in the tunnel does not. There was no blast to summon a town, no derailment visible from the valley. The disaster unfolded inside stone and smoke. Outside the tunnel, the mountain looked unchanged. Inside, Train 8017 had become a record of suffocation and silence. Hundreds of civilians died because a freight train stalled where its own exhaust could not disperse. When others reached the train, the disaster was no longer theoretical. The tunnel held evidence of a catastrophe already complete. A train designed to move freight stood still in the dark. The silence around it became part of Balvano's historical record. Officials had a death toll to report, but unauthorized passengers had entered without the paperwork that makes official counting possible. The official figure was 517 deaths. It is the number repeated in accounts, memorial references, and railway histories. A formal total can look final on paper. At Balvano, the paper could not reliably reconstruct who had climbed aboard. Some victims could be counted through records. Others may have existed only in family absence, never in a complete railway list. The passengers were not supposed to be on a freight train. Wartime hunger and need made that rule less powerful than survival. The official toll is 517. Because unauthorized passengers were difficult to document, later accounts have questioned whether it was complete. There was no full passenger manifest because many people boarded illicitly. That is the record's clearest explanation for the missing count. A disaster can be measured in bodies. History is poorer when it cannot recover the names attached to them. The record does not settle every detail of the stop, the discovery, or the full toll. It does settle the scale of failure. Balvano does not need a guessed number or a perfect timeline to be understood. Its documented facts are devastating enough. They boarded during war for reasons that were painfully ordinary. The tunnel made those ordinary choices fatal on an enormous scale. The Balvano disaster remains among Italy's worst railway tragedies. Its mechanism was quiet, mechanical, and entirely preventable in principle. Train 8017 became a number in railway history. For its passengers, it was supposed to be a way through wartime scarcity. Army Tunnel was not a battlefield. It became lethal because wartime systems put people and exhaust inside a confined space. Some disasters leave photographs everyone knows. Balvano left a quieter archive, reports, disputed totals, and a tunnel in the mountains. The unanswered details should not be filled with invention. The documented record already shows how the disaster happened: a stalled freight train, a poorly ventilated tunnel, locomotive exhaust, civilians fleeing scarcity. That is Balvano's documented core. Balvano is often absent from broader wartime memory, despite the scale recorded in its official toll and later histories. The record is strongest where it names the lethal conditions: locomotive exhaust, carbon monoxide, confinement, and a stalled train. Why 8017 stopped may remain disputed. Why people died inside Army Tunnel is not disputed by the documented account. Balvano deserves remembrance not as a puzzle, but as a documented failure that trapped civilians with the exhaust of their own train. This channel follows the records left after history moves on: files, omissions, official numbers, and the people those numbers conceal. If Balvano stayed with you, follow this channel. Next, the government file that documented a disaster and helped keep it quiet.